My name is John Raquet, and I'm going to talk to you about today the global industrial gases business and the impact of COVID-19 on our industry. So for the agenda today, I'm going to talk about the status of the global gases business today, the restructuring of the industry that's happened over the past 3 years, and the impact of COVID-19 that is currently affecting many parts of the world and is likely to have an impact over the next 18 months. And then just briefly summarize what I think will happen over the next couple of years. So the global gases business reached $76.5 billion in 2019. Now, to explain that excludes equipment sales, hard goods and consumables related to welding, wholesales, and non-specific gas businesses like LPG and home care services that are not oxygen related. The impact of the strong US dollar suppressed market growth by 5% last year. The underlying growth of volumes and pricing was reasonably good, but in the second half of last year had a negative impact on the overall performance of the business, as well as the impact of the US dollar. Significant restructuring has taken place, as I mentioned, in the past 3 years. Air Liquide acquired Airgas in 2016. Linde and Praxair merged, which was finally agreed in October 2018. Linde of Gas Americas was sold off to Mesa and CVC Consortium in March this year, and Praxair Europe was mainly sold to Toyo Nippon Sanso, now called Nippon Gases in Europe, in October last year. The industrial gases in EBIT is at an all-time high, currently running at around 18% EBIT margin for the tier 1 players. And the global economy and industrial gas business has been impacted clearly by the COVID-19 pandemic, which I'll speak about a bit later on. So let's turn attention to the graph you'll see next to me, which is about the comparison of the gas growth, industrial production, and GDP, and this is all on the global level, since 1980 to 2019. And you can see that the gas industry has in the main performed better than both GDP and IPI. Obviously, back in 2009, everything came to a crunch, and the industrial gases business was not immune in that year to the decline in the market. Our industry globally experienced a 10% reduction in the business, but thankfully our industry is very robust, and that we regained our position to about 2008 by 2012. Along the way, though, up to 2019, we've really experienced relatively lower growth than we have seen in the previous 2-3 decades. And in fact, in 2016, there was another mini decline, mainly related to the strength of the US dollar, which has an impact on as this is all presented in dollars, it had an impact on the gases business at that time. The actual global revenue trends, as you can see that we've mapped out, we follow the tier 1 companies, and we take what their total business was doing, gas business that is, and then what the underlying is. So we strip out the currency impact, we strip out mergers and acquisitions, and also the natural gas pass-through impact. So you can see that the underlying performance of our industry was performing a lot better than what was totally recorded by the gas companies. And then the next chart, we have the underlying revenue drivers split between volume and price. And you can see the impact in the last few quarters of volume dropping away in the last half of 2019. Pricing actually stood up relatively well. So structurally, I would like to show you a chart here which shows the global gases business split by player, major player, in 2017, and how the industry looked at that time. Air Liquide was clearly the number one player, Linde the number two, Praxair the number three, and then you had Air Products and Toynep and Sanso and Mesa as some of the other players. And you can see that of those major tier one players, they accounted for just under 70% of the global gases business. Now take a look at what happened in 2019. And this follows the merger of Linde and Praxair, and they have become the clear number one player, Air Liquide number two. But what has happened is that as part of the mandated divestments required by our industry and authorities, the FTC and the European Commission, and in one or two other countries, they had to divest large chunks of business in order for this transaction to be completed. And so the beneficiaries of that have been Toynep and Sanso, as I've mentioned, in Europe, Mesa in the US, and also Air Water from Japan has picked up some of the business in India. So what's the status of the Praxair-Linde merger, now called Linde PLC? The North American package mostly went to MG Industries, the joint venture between Mesa and CVC, the private equity group. Praxair absorbed the home care business, but then very recently sold the life gas business to a local distributor called Nexair. Matheson, the subsidiary of Toynep and Sanso, acquired some of the Hyco business, and the Laporte Hyco units were actually acquired by some of the customers that Linde had served. And then Iwatani recently picked up some merchant hydrogen business from MG Industries that they felt was not part of their ongoing portfolio. In South America, Brazil, Chile, and Colombia were all restructured, and MG Industries picked up those businesses from both Linde and Praxair. The European package, most of the European package for Praxair was sold to Toynep and Sanso. And one other event happened, or one other restructuring happened, was that the tier two Italian company SIAD group that was part owned by Praxair was acquired. The Praxair share was acquired back, and and became a completely independent company. And in Asia and the Far East, as I mentioned, first of all, Linde and Praxair sold some businesses in India, and that went to Air Water. Linde Gas Korea sold some of the business to a private equity group called IMM. And then Praxair and Linde have actually sold a little bit. Actually, it's mainly Linde sold part of their southern China business to Chinese companies. In terms of industry activity, what else has been happening? Well, obviously, Linde Group, the new Linde PLC, is in the process of integrating both companies. That's going well, and that's underway. They will continue to their cost reduction program, and they will likely to divest some non-core businesses over the coming year or 2 years. Air Liquide is still integrating the air gas business, but much of that has been achieved. They're also integrating the recent acquisition of Tech Air, a sort of medium-sized distributor that Air Gas acquired via Air Liquide last year. And they are focusing on investment, and Air Liquide is focusing on investment in the Middle East and the Asia Pacific region. One of the major changes going on as well is with Air Products, where they acquired a CO2 business in Europe, and which was ACP, and they're integrating that. But they have made quite a large strategic shift to large gasification projects and chemical expansion in the Middle East, China, and the Texas Gulf Coast region. And we've also seen recently that they've acquired some HYCO units from refineries. So they're continually investigating possible acquisition targets in North America, South America, Middle East, and the Asia Pacific region. Toy Nippon Sanso, that's currently integrating the North American HYCO business with Matheson. We understand that they will be obviously working and understanding the European business that they've acquired and essentially protecting what was a very profitable business. And then they intend to develop their Asian business outside of Japan. But let's not forget some of the other companies like Mesa Group. They are rationalizing and understanding the new operating structure with their JV partner CVC, and they will continue to invest in China and the Asia Pacific region. Airwater has undertaken an expansion within the Asia region for starters. And secondly, they have acquired equipment companies both in Europe and the US as they entered those markets via an equipment strategy rather than a gas strategy. Yingde and Baosteel Gas, both part of the PAG investment group. Yingde remains the number one supply scheme player in China, but they recently announced that they were interested in the Indian market and have made a strategic entry into that market. So their first venture outside of China. And no doubt the new CEO of Yingde, Stephen Feng, will be also looking at trying to consolidate Baosteel Gas with the Yingde operations. And then finally, Iwatani, they continue to look at opportunities in Southeast Asia, opportunities in hydrogen and helium, and they have recently acquired some business, special gases business in the US and some hydrogen business. So what about 2020 and beyond? The major events impacting on the global industrial gases business, well, there are three, basically, as far as I can see. Covid-19 pandemic, the global economy has been impacted adversely, and the IMF is predicting a decline of 3% in the global GDP in 2020. Europe, the US, and South America are expected to be hardest hit. Mixed impact across the manufacturing, petrochemicals, electronics, and metal sector. However, food and medical sectors have been still remain positive, and the level impact and rate of recovery has economists rushing to find the answers. I can't give you the answers there, really. I can give you a view of what we think will happen. But certainly no one really knows what the impact of the pandemic is going to have over the next 18 months at this stage. But we mustn't forget that it's not just the pandemic. The pandemic has caused us to not use transport fuels. We're not flying, we're not driving our cars, or we're reducing the amount of time we're using our cars and so on. So not surprisingly, the refining industry and the sale of oil has collapsed in terms of pricing and volume. And so the low oil prices and other energy sectors is going to also have a dampening effect on the industrial gases business, because obviously we require power. And if power prices are going down, well, so will the sales price, particularly in on-sites, will be going down as well in terms of revenues generated from that, particularly in the hydrogen sector if natural gas pricing is down. So we have to take into account the impact of lower energy costs. And also, not surprisingly, there are many projects that were slated for the Middle East, which, of course, being oil economy dependent, will be impacted by the much lower oil prices that they had not envisaged. And one other item which I bring to your attention is also the helium business. Up until, I would say, February, March time, helium was in great short supply. I'm sure many of people listening to this are aware of the high helium prices and the low availability of product from particularly spot sources. The COVID-19 pandemic has suppressed demand recently, and this has caused a lightening or a loosening of the supply conditions that were very tight. I wouldn't say that there's plenty of helium around, but what I would say is that the tight conditions have gone away over the past few months. What we will see is new additions to capacity coming on stream in 2021 and 2022 that will result in more helium being available and potentially in lower pricing of product in the marketplace. Now, will that be enough to regain the volumes that we've seen lost over the past decade? The helium shortage 2.0 in 2011, 2012 caused a major rethink of end users using helium as a product, particularly in the MRI manufacturing sector. And as a result of that, technology shift and changes in welding, in MRI manufacturing, and even in leak detection has resulted in a change in the demand dynamics of helium. Now, with more availability and lower pricing, we don't expect some of that volume has been lost forever, right? So we've got to see what's going to take the place of those applications for the helium business. So in summary, I would like to present this chart, which shows what happened from 2009, the last recession, what we expect to see in 2020 overall, and then what we see panning out to 2025. The industrial gas business could drop to between 7 and 12% in 2020. If the IMF predicting 3% decline in GDP, that could point to a 7 to 10% decline in industrial production index. Now, if you follow what happened in 2009, the industrial gases business was impacted even higher than the industrial production index. But we don't think the situation is as bad as 2009 in all the sectors. So what we intend to do is we think that it'd be down by about 7 or 8%. But if the worst case scenario happens, our industry could be down by 12%. But you'll see from the chart that the recovery would be expected. It's almost a V-shaped recovery, which is usual for our industry, that once things come about and recover, the end user industries, that our industry recovers very quickly. Obviously, there's mixed activity right at this moment. I'm hearing that in China, the steel industry is very buoyant. There's actually a lack of oxygen available for the merchant market, so pricing has gone up because more oxygen is needed in the steel sector. So, converse to that with the decline in Europe and in the States, it'll be interesting to see what really pans out. But we really forecast a growth globally for the industrial gases business of between 4.5% and 5.5% a year over the next 5 years once we enter the recovery. Obviously, energy costs and pass-through will also determine how quickly our industry recovers. So thank you for listening. I turn it back over to Frank for any questions that you may have. Many thanks indeed.